At the beginning, as I told you, I was feeling so stressed in trying to manage the language in all its dimensions perfectly that I'm sure I was not projecting any kind of power. And if you don't position yourself as someone that feels comfortable, that is sharing something you are strong about and you know about, and you can help others with that, you won't make it. So once I got the fluency and became more recurrent in speaking with a lot of different audiences, very small teams, large audiences in conferences or business gatherings or things like that. I then focused on other aspects that are key for communication, for influencing, and for feeling empowered yourself and inspire others to empower. And that is your self-confidence, that I think is a very important tool. If you manage to believe in yourself and in what you want to share and how that can impact positively in the environment you are dealing with, that puts you in the position where someone looks at you and you don't even have to talk about anything. They see you as someone that will bring something valuable to the table.
An enormous welcome to the Power Talks. Firstly, thank you for being here. Thank you for pressing play. Thank you for giving me your time from my heart. It's really, really lovely to have you here. So this is my new podcast, my first podcast, and we are going to examine what it is that prevents women from being able to access and express their personal power, especially women who speak English as their second language or their third or their fourth, right? As that is absolutely, definitely an extra barrier. So I have some amazing guests in this series and I cannot wait to introduce you to them. Episode number 9, Paula Calvo. Right, I was very, very excited and happy when Paula said yes to come on the show. She is a seasoned business professional with extensive financial services, banking and insurance industry experience. She's worked internationally at senior management levels as an integral member for several global institutions with cross-functional and business management accountability. She provides strategic direction and effective execution of business plans. She's very passionate about building diverse teams, being a catalyst for change and driving revenues through visionary companies. And she has been able to work for a wide variety of companies, from small startups to global Fortune 100 companies, helping create an impactful vision for the future. So her depth and breadth of knowledge is fantastic, and it was really beautiful that she agreed to come and share her experiences with us. We had 2 conversations. I'll explain that in a second. The first part really is dedicated to English and communicating in English and communicating in general as a woman in male-dominated spaces. So we talk about realising that moment when you realise that English is just a tool. We talk about being able to have influence and how that comes from what you transmit on a deep level. We talk about cultivating self-confidence. This is also something that comes from a deep self-knowledge. And she shares her early years with us, the young, shy Paula, and how she helped herself to grow and overcome her fears. And we do talk about Paula's experience of often being the only woman in the room. So that was our first conversation. Then what happened is we stopped recording and Paula and I continued talking, and we started talking about women supporting women and quotas. And we had this really, really interesting conversation. And I asked Paula if she would be open to having that conversation again with me, but publicly, if we could record it. So she came back the other day and we recorded that second part of the conversation that we had, so today you're getting like two episodes in one, like an added bonus. So enjoy it. Enjoy. Have fun. So when you saw the post, when you saw me asking for people to come on my show, what made you think, oh yes, I want to participate?
Well, I would say that 2 things. One, I'm sure it's a challenge for me to try to share
Okay. Oh,
experiences.
yeah, nice. Okay. Yeah.
And I think
Yeah,
that in
bravo.
today's world, we need to be generous in letting others know how you feel on certain circumstances. And this was one of those invitations to do that. Especially if you think you are
Mm.
shy or that you have some kind of trouble communicating. So, first would be a challenge. And second, the topic about English as a second language is so close to my life that I said, well, if I think it's an opportunity to share, this topic is something from where I could feel comfortable sharing. So those two ideas
Bravo.
came to mind
Amazing.
when you
Yeah.
sent the invitation.
You speak English as a second language in your professional environment, in your career. I guess have you done that for your whole career?
Well, I've done it not for the whole career. Um, I would say that my first decade in the professional exercise was in
Mm.
fully Spanish world in terms of interaction with my
Mm.
peers and with the environment and with the business stakeholders. But English was always
Mm.
part of my personal environment. So trying
Okay.
to get more resources for my professional and business possibilities, I used English
Mm.
for trying to meet people that had certain experience or that was
Mm.
developing theories or methodologies, mostly on the academic side.
So once you've started working more and more in English, and you are starting to use the language in your professional environments, how would you how does it affect, or how did it affect, and maybe still now, I don't know, the way that you communicate it generally, like,
Well,
yeah.
first, the first exposure for a great demand of speaking English almost constantly was because after the first decade I was mentioning, I joined an American corporation in a regional role.
Mm.
So I was going to interact with a number of countries, but the,
Mm.
the supervisory level for the role were all in the United States. And even when they were not all Americans, that was the official corporate language. So daily, I was now in a
Mm.
place where I had to use the language. And at the beginning,
Mm.
I found it hard in terms of making sure I was being understood. Uh,
Mm.
my learning of the language happened at school, at all levels of school. And then, as I told you, there was kind of a gap in the professional sense. So it was restarting
Mm.
again, and in a place where I thought that everyone would be so fluent and so nurtured and polished in terms of pronunciation, vocabulary, that I was feeling stressed. Fortunately, the
Mm.
stress
Mm.
came down rapidly, and the most important aspect that helped for that was that, as I said, not everyone was from an English speaking origin in this corporation. Well, it was a global corporation, so there was
Yeah.
people from all over that if they were at senior management levels, they would probably be located there in New York, where the decisions were made. But you had people from India, from other Latin countries, from Spain, and their accents were so strong, even from Japan, where I also went for a project.
Mm.
Their original accents were so strong that pronunciation was not perfect, far from that.
Mm.
So
Mm.
I felt at my ease quite soon, and I said, okay, I know the wording I want to use, I know how to have a good syntaxis on that, and then pronunciation is
Yeah.
not the first item anyone will criticize. So I started convincing
Mm.
myself
Mm.
of that, and fluency came almost naturally.
When you are in an environment where English is the common language, but you have people from all over the world, it really highlights the fact that actually English is just a tool
I cannot agree more.
because there's a lot of emotion.
But you
Yeah,
discover that
yeah.
over time, as I said.
Takes time.
The real
Yeah, no,
the real activity you need to cover is communication, I think, and getting your message across.
yeah,
So yes, the
right.
language
This is the
is just the means for that.
There's a little bit of noise in the recording here on my side. I think somebody is doing their garden. So I'm just going to jump in here. I asked Paula here if she could share her experience when it comes to expressing power or showing her expertise or having influence in English.
At the beginning, as I told you, I was feeling so stressed in trying to manage the language in all its dimensions perfectly that I'm sure I was not projecting
Yeah.
any kind of power. And if you don't position yourself as someone that feels comfortable, that is sharing something you are strong about and you know about, and you can help others with that, you won't make it. So once I got the fluency and became more recurrent in speaking with a lot of different audiences, very small teams, large audiences in conferences or business gatherings or things like that. I then focused on other aspects that are key for communication, for influencing, and for feeling empowered yourself and inspire others to empower. And that is your self-confidence, that I think is a very important tool. If you manage to believe in yourself and in what you want to share and how that can impact positively in the environment you are dealing with, that puts you in the position where someone looks at you and you don't even have to talk about anything. They see you as someone that will bring something valuable to the table.
Like the belief system that you have, like how much does it support you? Like this idea of self-confidence. Confidence comes from the word trust, right? The root of the word trust. And so self-confidence is essentially how much do you trust yourself? And that's something that nobody can really teach you that, right? Like, no, I can't teach. Like, I work with communication. I can't teach people to be self-confident. I can help them cultivate it. I can teach them techniques of how to stand or talk, but I can't actually. People can't actually be taught how to have self-confidence. It's something that you have to cultivate with time and persistence and consistency. And yeah, it's really deep, I think, that thing of self-confidence.
Yes.
I think.
Well, as long as I move forward in my presence in this planet, I would say, because it's not only on the professional side, I am more and more convinced that knowing yourself well impacts everything you do. And you are not conscious about that when you are at early stages, just trying to prove yourself you can provide results, the ones that the environment expects from you. But when you know yourself, you know what makes you feel passionate about something, you know what makes you angry, and you show that whenever you interact. So if you know what triggers that, you can try to at least minimize the moments where you are exposed to those scenarios if you don't want your communication to be affected or to be perceived in such a way. So, yes, and knowing yourself, you build your self-confidence. And you also create the atmosphere for others to trust you because you look sure about what you say in every aspect. The energy you are surrounded by, the eyes that you use to look at someone, and that shiny spectrum that you have in your view, the tone of your voice, the pace of your message. To be honest with you, my personal experience, I was extremely shy. So at school, I would not even knock at the door of the classroom on the other side of a hallway, because my face would be red instantly, and I would not even be able to pronounce a word to the person that would open that door. And reflecting a lot on why I was having that kind of behavior, I recognized that I could not find a good reason to stay like that, that all the answers I could give to myself were, you are just cutting any kind of possibility of knowing other people, of letting others know about you, of doing things together with a community. And if you do that, you're signing your sentence for being alone your entire life. And being alone my entire life, that was something scary in my mind. I was not expecting that to be my future. So I became aware of that, and I said, okay, let's trespass this first line. So I would go to the class, knock the door, and even with my red face, I would ask for a piece of chalk. As simple as that. And for me, that represented a strong effort at that time. But I did it once, and I could see that nothing bad came out of that. I got the piece of chalk gently, with kindness, and I said, okay, thank you, and I left. That was the first time. But if that was the experience, why not trying again and again and again? And with very small acts like that, I was pushing my own self-imposed barrier further and further and further. And I can tell you that still today, I see something I like in a window shop, and if I don't see the price on it, sometimes I really try to avoid going in and asking for the price. And this conversation comes back to my mind. Why are you doing that? Even today. But I know that I focused my efforts first on things that had direct impact in my professional development. So on that side, I can tell you I'm pretty much mature now. And even when I have to prepare a lot, if I have to speak in front of 1,000 people, I do it. And I don't feel bad while doing it. It's just the moment until I start,
That's really interesting that you had that level of awareness as a young girl, and that and it sounds like you talked yourself through that process, right? That's what it sounds like, that you kind of, you recognized by yourself and in yourself, okay, this is something that I need to work on and work with. That's really interesting. Because I think for a lot of people, it comes from an external influence or an external catalyst, like a coach or a mentor or somebody that you admire, it's really lovely that came very much from yourself.
Well,
that came from
it's amazing you say that, because my mother was completely outspoken. She could talk with the walls. I have an older sister, exactly the same. So why I was so shy,
it's getting interesting now.
But also within my cultural environment, within my family, just asking for the help of a psychologist at that time was something not well seen. Why would you need that? My family was a fervent religious believer. So if you had anything different in you that you wanted explanations or help for, you would be expected to talk to God, not to another. So I think I found an interim solution by just thinking a lot about it and testing myself on different scenarios.
Most of Paula's professional career has meant that she has been surrounded by men. And I asked Paula how she deals with that.
I've been the only one woman many times in large groups. But
that's what I thought. Which is not easy, Paula. It's not an easy position. My goodness me.
No, but moments that I remember that marked me a lot. Like when I started my first executive committee role or senior management position. I transferred from Argentina to Mexico, and it was my first day at the NextCom meeting in Mexico, 2 weeks after I arrived. And the meeting was going to happen in a room that was hard for me to find because I was so new that I barely knew the building I was working in. But all of a sudden, I was at the door. And when I was approaching, I could hear a lot of noise. Well, there were a lot of people talking to each other in there, sure. When I stepped at the door, it was a full silence. And when I stepped in, it was deeper. The silence was even deeper. So I said, hello, not in English. Everyone was speaking Spanish, which is my native language and was theirs. And even in that scenario, with your own language, you could feel completely abandoned from any kind of compassion or belongingness or anything. Because everyone would look at you, very smoothly respond to your hello, how are you? And then back to silence.
Yeah.
So it took me a little bit, first of all, to start talking about anything in that meeting. Because my first worry was to try to understand the interaction protocol. And I think that's also something very important when you try to communicate. If you don't understand how the group works, your words will probably be wasted.
This is the dynamics. This is like the dynamics and the architecture of power, right? How does it work around here?
So no matter the language, first of all, I was trying to understand that behavior. So imagine, first meeting, my participation was not so proactive. Of course, the CEO spoke about me just joining the team, coming from another country, from a different trajectory. And this was in the banking and financial services world that is still known for a male-dominated field. So
very much so.
So he introduced me, everyone in a complacent way saying, oh, welcome, welcome, welcome. And then when business topics started, my first day, I was not yet on the loop of what was happening in every area, so I listened very carefully, and I asked a couple of questions, no more than that, to make sure I was understanding correctly some of the items shared. But then, the following week, we were gathered again. And I said, I don't want this to be my regular way of interacting and of having my partners around, all just pretending that they are being nice, but not being themselves either. Because before I stepped into the room, they were not silent. So the only factor that interfered in that fluency of interaction and empathy and communication among them was that I just stepped in. So I went back to the room. This time it was easy to get there. I knew the way. And while approaching, I could hear them talking. And when I arrived at the door, again, the silence. But this time I was breaking out my own barrier and telling them, hello, how are you? I'm sure that you were all very enthusiastic, talking among yourselves with respect and professionalism. So please continue to do so. Just include me in your conversation. I'll be happy to share if I have something to provide to the interaction. And if not, I learn from you. Please, feel free. And I think that shook them. They would not expect a woman to allow them to do something, you know. But they started smoothly.
Yeah.
And it was a two-way challenge. As I told you, I used to be shy. So imagine myself stepping in with such an attitude. And from that moment on, we had a lot of fun. And I spent almost 10 years working with that group of people.
Good.
And after
Okay.
10 years, instead of
Great.
one woman, we were three out of 18.
Okay.
So
Okay.
some progress made too on
Okay.
that side.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. Because and I say this to like all of the guests that I've had that work in very, very male dominated environments, like on behalf of all women, thank you. I'm serious because we really, really need representatives in those kind of environments, and it is not easy. It's not an easy place to be. Wisdom, Paula. What wisdom can you share with our listeners?
Wisdom.
The
That
best
sounds
advice.
so
What have you got?
demanding. I'm not sure I'm so wise. But
All right. let me take the pressure down a little bit. What advice? What advice have you got, Paula?
but no, I think one of the first things is that we must not victimize ourselves. Just think, I'm a woman and I'm here making such an effort. Because in the example I was telling you, and you recognized
Correct.
it, men had also to do their own effort
Ex-
in learning how to treat us
yeah.
because they were not used to.
Yeah.
So it's
Exactly.
a
Yeah.
common
Yeah.
willingness for evolution, if you want, in the
Mm.
interaction.
Okay, and this is now the second part of the interview. So remember that we were stopped recording and we had a really interesting conversation about women supporting women and quotas. And Paula very generously agreed to come back and record that conversation or a version of that conversation. So here we go. This is the second part of our interview. That sometimes we see a gap, right? That I've experienced it, and I think most women have probably experienced it, where there is a gap between what some women in our network or what some associations we might belong to say in terms of their belief system, no, their value system, women supporting women, but there might be a gap in their behaviour. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, thank you for inviting me to this conversation. I would say
You're very welcome. You're very welcome.
I have mixed experiences. Yeah, I do believe there's a gap, but in my own life, I've seen that there's a positive gap and a negative gap. And what do I mean by positive or negative in this sense? Positive because I do know and been very fortunate to find in my journey a number of women that could break barriers and are really available and willing to help others make the path easier, smoother, faster, and sponsor others, because I think that's a key aspect. Not only mentoring or sharing experiences for you to learn about that and see if that can do some kind of impact on your own ideas, projections, or plans, but extremely willingful to help others. So
Yeah, like to
even
champion them
before,
in them,
yeah,
like champion them, advocate for them.
right, even before you ask for help, they are there.
Yeah,
They kind of see how you evolve, and they approach you, and they recognize you, and they know how constructively bring you new ideas to go even further.
yeah,
So that to me is a positive gap. And I'm so happy that there's a number of women I've found in my own path that help me in that sense,
the same,
and that encourage me to take risks,
the same.
to think out of the box, and to be willing to openly speak about that. I
Yeah,
used to be quite shy in the past, and that kind of women were very meaningful for me to be today talking to you about things that I know that will go to a broader spectrum with my own feeling that I will be of help and not hesitating.
yes,
But on the other side, I can definitely tell you that I think there's a negative gap, and that negative gap, I like to believe it's made out of exceptions, of women that, yes, I know, and it's been hard on my personal experience to progress in the corporate ladder and things like that. But there are women that come to you and tell you, yes, I'm here to help. I want to inspire you. But when you raise your hand, no, I already told you. I did this, this, and this. That's all you can count on me. I remember very well one extremely successful lady. One day I just asked her, now that you are in this company, can you just facilitate me the name of the HR person that works for you in Europe? Because I was in Latin America, so that I can reach out to her. So I was not asking for a recommendation. I was not asking for a personal introduction. I just asked for, could you give me the name so that I can reach out? And the answer I got was so surprising for me. She told me, I don't help anyone within my company get closer to people here. I don't recommend anyone to any specific job. So I won't be able to help you on that. And even in that negative gap, I can tell you that that was a very big lesson for me.
What did you
appreciated?
Yeah, tell me.
Yeah,
What you took away from that?
I appreciated she was so straightforward. So no false expectations were created from there.
Okay, that's interesting.
From that moment on, I knew, okay, I can ask her and she will be open in telling me what she did in X, Y, or Z situation that I happened to learn in the news she was going through. But I know that's all. I cannot go to any other area of exchange so that's positive. I would not intimidate her or kind of disturb our interaction by bringing things she would not be willing to address.
Sure.
And my expectations were set on the right perspective. So even in the negative side, as I tell you, I see these two things as positive. I learned a couple of things in that conversation. But
and
you find that kind of scenarios.
I find it really interesting because when I've experienced both as well, right? Like I've been on the receiving end of absolutely incredible women that have enabled me to evolve in ways that I couldn't even imagine myself evolving, right? And I'm so incredibly grateful. And then I've been on the receiving end of the other side where I have been surprised by and very disappointed. It's hurtful. No, it's surprising and hurtful when you expect or think that women will support you in some way, and it can be in the smallest ways. Like it can be a tiny little thing. Like it doesn't need to be a big ask. And I kind of I try to rationalize it myself. No, I try to think about, okay, why would a woman not feel comfortable about supporting another woman? Like where does it come from? And I think there's two conclusions that I've come to, and I'd love to know what you think about them. I think one, it's women that are still operating out of like a patriarchal thought paradigm where it's unconscious, that they don't even realise that they're still somehow threatened by you in some way. Like women for a very long time, we were in competition, right? Like we've been set up to be in competition against each other. That's not the case these days. But I think sometimes people still act unconsciously out of that old paradigm where they're somehow threatened by you, see you as competition, see something in you that makes them feel uncomfortable. And I think that's why even in sometimes you can I've experienced it with people that are very close to me. And I've experienced it in in groups, where groups that are about championing women. That's what they would say their ethos or their value system is that. And I'm kind of thinking, wow, where does it come from? Like, and it's like the only conclusion that I have is that it's like an operating out of an old thought paradigm, like an unconscious kind of embedded conditioning that still thinks, oh, you know, this woman's somehow a threat to me, you know. I feel like that about it sometimes.
Well, I'm not sure we are over from that perspective. You mentioned these days it's different. I think we are in a transition where
Yeah, we
it's
are.
becoming more and more frequent not to have that kind of situations.
Yeah.
Sorority is increasing, I would
Yes, it
say.
is, and thank
As
God for it, you know.
yeah, but there's a lot to do in the way you face the world, each one of us.
Yeah.
Competition is always there because we still play a tennis match and someone wants to win.
Yeah. Yeah.
No matter if it's two people or you have an entire football game with 22 persons on the field, the competition is not a bad thing. It's a stimulus for you to evolve, to make progress, to do better. If you don't compete, even against yourself. So I like people that reflects that I'm trying to be the best version of me. And to be like that, it's me self-criticizing,
Self-analyzing.
becoming aware
Yeah.
of where my shortages are
Yeah.
and then trying to overcome them.
Yeah.
So I don't find anything wrong with competition, except when you take it to an extreme. And in very large corporations, where the majority of women that has become visible as role models in the business world sit, you still don't have such a modern mindset so established. So many of the women that are now holding these top roles have gone through very hard paths
Get there.
to get there.
Wow.
And sometimes, even inadvertently, you've had to make alliances. You had to keep your woman side a little bit away from the way. So I believe that sometimes it's difficult to feel safe if you are excessively committed and acting proactively to promote other women because you still belong to a community that is not 100% women majorities anywhere. So I think that's a threat. Sometimes it's a bias you have.
Yeah, yeah,
unconscious,
exactly.
as
An
you're saying.
unconscious, like,
Yeah.
automatic pilot kind of behavior. Yeah.
Yeah, and some other times it's just a fear because you arrived to those visible points where you come up in magazines or in ratings or you get awards for being the first one in such a role, for being the first in being the president of a company, for being just you, only one, and still making impact. And there's a fear of losing that.
Insecurity. It's so interesting. I find it fascinating. Being like, because as I'm
So,
becoming, as I'm growing as a professional, no, and then you start to experience the positive and the negative to a greater degree, and I just find it really interesting. Yeah, I think as well
but
sometimes.
in the way you were educated, you'll be happy to be the first and to be able to bring more, or you'll be happy to keep the crown of the first
Yeah, I
forever.
mean,
So that's
yeah, yeah, that's, yeah.
that creates the bias
Yeah,
and the gap.
yeah, yeah. Because for me, you know, like the whole idea behind this podcast is to be about to think about how do we redefine what power looks and sounds like, what power is, right? And for me, and I can feel myself getting more powerful as I'm aging and as I'm growing professionally, but it means nothing to me unless everybody else that I'm in contact with it also feels more powerful. I'm not interested in the kind of power that means I have some, so now therefore you don't have any, right? Like I'm interested in the kind of power that is about, it's regenerative, it's shared, you know, it's something that we all benefit from. That's just a personal thing, but it's
Well, it's interesting because I think that the concept of power is similar to the concept of success. You provide to the world your own definition
yeah,
and you act upon it.
yes, yeah,
So you feel powerful, and your power comes from empowering others. That's great.
Yeah.
Others feel powerful just by getting personal
Yeah,
accomplishments
yeah,
visible.
yeah. It's very true.
Hmm.
It's a personal thing. Yeah, interesting. I think another
Hmm.
reason, this is what I was thinking about the other day, that another reason why people don't, women don't always use their light, use their attention to kind of amplify other women is sometimes because they don't realize how simple it can be, right? Like one tiny, tiny act, and it's so simple, in passing in conversation. Oh yeah, I worked with Paula; she's an amazing woman, or whatever. It's or liking a post, or commenting on a post, or just sharing your name, or like a tiny, 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 tiny act can have an enormous
Hmm.
effect. And I think sometimes people don't realize how much influence they can have, and so
Hmm.
they maybe don't act because they go, well, my little contribution is going to be so small it won't mean anything. And I've
Hmm.
seen, actually, no, I've received, I had an incredible thing happen to me where one of my clients, client X, liked a post, which meant that client B saw that client X had liked the post and wanted to work with me because of that simple like, because it was validation enough,
Hmm.
and that second client that came to me was a person who was instrumental in like radically changing my trajectory. Like she kind of
Wow.
catapulted me into a new stratosphere just purely because
Hmm.
her coming to me because of who she was and the level that she was working at, but her faith in me, which came from this one like from
Hmm.
another person, meant that I had to step into where I was going anyway down that road, but I had to like really step into it quickly so that I could help this woman, and it was from a one
Hmm.
like, Paula. And
No, that's a
it's,
great,
and I,
great
yeah,
experience. I must accept that I told you I was quite shy,
yeah,
and I used to think, what can I say?
yes, right, yeah,
It's so
yeah,
minor. So I was in
yeah,
that position, and it took me a while to
yeah,
realize that every word, every fact, every sign
exactly that,
counts. Uh, and after I convinced myself
yeah,
of that, and that was part of, it was a consequence of a number of
mm,
conversations, not actually focusing on
mm,
that, but after the exchange, reflecting
mm,
on what some other people
mm,
was talking about, that I became aware. So after that, I decided, yes, it costs
yeah,
nothing.
yeah.
Just one tick sometimes, only
Exactly
that.
that. That's exactly it.
And and now with social networks, that's even more
Yeah,
meaningful. Uh,
exactly.
but I had to put on some others'
Yeah,
shoes to
yeah,
understand that I was really able to even amplify them,
yeah,
their exposure,
yeah.
things like that. When you have thousands of connections on LinkedIn, which is
Mm,
my case, for
mm, mm,
example,
mm, mm.
just one click can open you to a number of
Yeah,
people that you would never cross in your life.
exactly.
So
And
you're right. I feel that I come from
yeah,
that from that
yeah.
learning.
And it's
To,
the
yes.
smallest thing that we can give each other, you know. It's the smallest thing,
Hmm.
and it has the potential to be enormous. It's amazing, I think it's really interesting to think of it in that way. All of our voices count
Hmm.
for something, all of our actions, all of
Yes.
our contribution.
Couldn't say it better. All of our
Yeah,
voices count. That's
absolutely. Yeah,
great. Yes.
yeah. Cool. So
Hmm.
then the other thing that we talked about last time that I wanted to go public with, but this is something that I can't articulate myself very well on this at all. So that's why I would like you to share, because I know that you're in a much better position to talk about this. Is this idea that in the pipeline there are not enough women that are prepared enough to be able to step into these roles that are going to be obligatory, right? I'm understanding that correctly. No, there will be soon certain laws that mean there will need to be.
There are legal quotas
Right.
being established,
And
yes, for the composition of boards.
and that there aren't enough women in the pipeline that will be able to do that adequately. Can you share a little bit with us about that? Your thoughts on that and what?
Okay. Eh, Let me start by my
Yes,
own view
please,
of preparedness,
please.
because these days it's a fact. There are a number of studies and statistics that show that women are academically extremely prepared
Yeah.
for being successful. Women go further in the level of studies. More women study than men, and in different areas of knowledge. Not yet on the famous STEM
Yes. Yeah.
subjects, which are science, technology, engineering, mathematics, which continue to be uh, with vast majority of men. And unfortunately, reality shows that things are not changing, at least not very fast, to gain parity in the level of women that enroll in those fields. But still, there are many. It's not that they don't exist. Not so many, but there are. And so there's the preparedness in terms of being ready because you get the knowledge. And then it's a preparedness because you get the experience in exercising your knowledge and developing other skills. That's the portion where I think we are getting short of preparedness, simply because also facts, statistics, studies show that there's very few women in the level of executive committees at companies. And now, in the majority of Europe, there's regulation that requires a minimum amount of women in their boards,
Yeah.
which is the next level after the executive committees. So it's even one step higher. And quotas go to now 40% of women required for boards. But then you go to the prior levels where you would say, well, the experience of this women professional is consolidating and giving her all the tools and the exposure to get to the board level. And you find that on average, large companies, because the other portion is we have a number in Spain, for example, the majority of companies are small or medium, and we don't have statistics on that. But on large companies, the women do not represent even 25% in that sector. And when you go to CEO levels, not only in Spain, but across Europe and globally, you don't find more than 6% on average of women holding those roles. So it's hard to figure out how you will be able not to fulfill at the first moment the 40%, but board mandates are not forever, are not
Yeah.
endless. So when you think in the longer term, how will you keep up running to be able to have always that 40% professionals with the right experience, the right skills, if you don't have the pipeline building from the experience required? And that's a reality today. And I know a number of organizations that are presently running investigations on what creates this so small amount of women at CEO level, because perhaps from there we can find a clue on how to articulate actions or overall definitions. And I'm not so fond of running everything through regulation. I know that the quota that exists now, required by law, may accelerate things, but I think it's unfair to think and to let others say, oh, she arrived to that role to comply
Yeah, but
with
do you
the
know
quota.
what? I'm just going to jump in here. So for me, this is one of those pervasive narratives that prevent women from aiming higher. It's been designed, I believe, to keep women questioning themselves about whether or not they belong or deserve to be in those high positions. I also personally do not believe that every single man that is on the C-suite or on the board is there purely based on merit. I just don't think that that's the case. I know lots of women, we all do, who have worked for men who are less capable, less talented, just less, no? But simply because they are a man, it means that they are afforded greater opportunities. Just by being a man, it opens more doors for them.
I think that it's basic that we don't forget we are all human beings, men and women. So in any area where we develop any kind of activity, we are error prone, women and men. We are not all knowing guys. We all have areas we know better, we have deeper expertise, and areas that we ignore, no matter the gender.
Yeah, sure, of course.
I think what we need is truly to have equal opportunities.
Absolutely.
But it's not that men have been guilty, and we probably arrived to the place where we are today in terms of how society is composed without men being intentional about that from the beginning.
Oh, that's interesting.
I think that's a reflection we also need to approach. Because in many societies, so many things happened over time. And I challenged one friend that I have that is historian, and I still don't have the answer. But imagine, we come from a world that used to have Cleopatra running the almost entire known world at her time. How we moved from that to where we are today.
Yeah, well.
So again, I think that it's crucial that we don't forget we are human beings. So if we want to judge, yes, there are men that make mistakes, there are women that make mistakes. There are men that are excellent CEOs and that runs very successful companies. There are women that do the same. Much less, unfortunately, so far. But
Thank you, Paula, for coming back.
oh, thank you again for opening this kind of conversations on topics that are not necessarily easy to approach.
Yeah. So what did you think? I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I also hope that if English is your second language or your third or your fourth, I really hope that this inspired you to be more vocal in English. You know, the world really needs you. Thank you again for listening. I really appreciate having you here. I think these conversations deserve to have as much visibility as possible, and you can really help with that by liking and subscribing. This is that moment. Like and subscribe. Thank you so much. And I'm sending you all a big power-filled hug. I hope you can feel that.